guys, it's SimScott185 here, and you join us on the ground at Redhill in our Katana. Two rather large people in the aircraft, probably knock you out the weight and balance. This is the latest in our Real General Aviation series, and as noted in the description, I am a real-world general aviation pilot. I am not an instructor, and this video should definitely not be used for real-world application. This is purely for fun in your flight simulator. That being said, we're going to jump in the cockpit, and today we're going to practice what happens when the engine goes bang in the aircraft. And we do a lot of work on this throughout the PPL through practice force landings, but today we're going to do it while we're in the circuit and see if we can glide to land, excuse me. And what we'll be doing is going up, doing a normal circuit, and at some point putting the power right back and seeing if we can glide in towards the runway. So what we'll do, we've got the aircraft started up. There's a couple of videos on that, guys, so I'm not going to go through that whole process with you again. Pull the parking brake off and we'll taxi over to the usual runway. I've got my settings as being clear weather. There's very little wind, and that will help when you're doing your first glides. We'll put in a little bit of takeoff flaps. So if we just pull that down, one flaps landing for our takeoff. If you haven't watched these videos before, do hit the subscribe button. Give it a like. There's a number of videos I've done around general aviation. I actually learned in a very similar aircraft to this, so hopefully it will prove useful. Let's just zoom out so we get our bearings. So the runway is straight in front of us. We're heading here. That's 08 right if you're interested at Redhill. And as we come up towards the runway, what we'll do is we'll just do a little bit of a briefing of what's going to happen, because it will happen quite quickly, as things tend to do in the circuit, and we want to be ready for when this happens. So we'll do a little bit of a briefing, we'll get underway, and maybe we'll try and do a couple of these just to get the muscle memory going in our brains. So guys, we're at the threshold of the runway. What we normally do is our usual checks around checking the magnetos, etc. We're in a simulator, so I'm not going to do that. I have noted, though, just as one of my checks, that my flaps are at landing, so I'm going to pull them back to takeoff. And that's the reason we do checks, just to make sure we're all set up in the right way. So normally what we do is self-brief if we're on our own, or if we have a passenger, just what would happen in the case of an engine failure after takeoff. And that might be that we stop on the runway. We might continue if we don't have enough runway left to stop on, and then look for a field basically directly off the nose of the aircraft. In this case, though, what we're going to simulate is we're in the circuit, we're enjoying our day at Redhill, we're doing a few touch and goes, and then in one of our circuits the engine's going to quit on us, and we simulate that in the real world basically by just pulling the throttle back. Exactly the same effect, except in the real world the propeller would probably stop turning. It might windmill depending on the speed, but we're not going to do that in this lesson. We might do it towards the end if we get confident, but at the moment all we're going to do is pull the throttle back, and what that allows is that we can do a touch and go and then take off and do another one, rather than sort of shutting the engine down, which means it would be stranded on the runway afterwards. We're going to go up into the circuit. Usual circuit at Redhill, so it's left hand off 08 right. We're going to follow the circuit. There's another video about doing circuits, so I'd suggest doing that one first before you attempt this. At some point we're going to simulate the engine going pop, and in the Katana what we do is we would aim for a speed of 70 knots, so we'll probably be going faster than that, so we'll pull the nose up to gain a little bit of height but also bleed off speed. Get to our best glide of 70 knots. We'll go to one stage of flaps, which is takeoff. We're going to aim for a point down the runway, probably further than we would touch down normally, just to make sure that we are actually going to make the field. That is critical in terms of when you're doing one of these. And then as we get closer and we're confident we're going to make it, we'll put in the last stage of flap. And the effect of that last stage of flap, as you'll see, is it adds drag, provides a bit more lift, but it brings our landing point closer towards us, and just means that we're in a controlled descent towards runway. So let's get underway, guys. We will see what happens. This will either go really well or spectacularly badly. So we're just going to get lined up on the runway and we'll be ready to go. Let's just pause here. Okay guys, so usual takeoff, we'll just let the parking brake off. Heels to the floor, got the rudders just dancing as we go down the runway. Little bit of right rudder, and we're aiming round about 50 knots in the Katana, 55, just to take off. That control tower on the left there is kind of sort of what it looks like at Redhill. It's a bit darker, and there's fire trucks that come out of those garages. So, oh look, I've been talking, and we've gone way over our rotate speed. So this is fine, guys. What we're gonna do is just get into a nice climb, around about sort of 60, 65 knots, which you can see here. And we've got a good rate of climb. We're just trimming as well. Again, there's another video on trimming, guys, if you haven't done this. I would if this is your first time watching this video, I'd go through the circuits video, go through trim. That'll make this much easier and make things a lot simpler. So, noise abatement, we need to avoid these buildings on our left-hand side. I'm going to bring up our flaps, and that gets into a more clean configuration. We'll continue left turn here. Being careful not to make too sharp a turn because of the forces involved in a turn. What we don't want to do is lose too much speed that we stall. Because of the forces in a turn, the stall speed actually increases rather than decreases. So just need to watch that. But pretty comfortable here. We can have a little look out the window, see where we are. Got the runway behind us over the wing, buildings here. And what we're going to do, as I say, this is all going to happen pretty quickly. We're going to get up to 1200 feet, which is circuit height. We'll just start our downwind leg. And then somewhere down the downwind, we might do it just before we turn base normally. We'll pop the engine and bring the speed back. So we'll level off at about 1200. Going to get the attitude right, and then power, and then trim. So we're good on attitude. We'll bring the power back to 25 on the manifold pressure, which is this dial here. For the first one, and you'll see in the other videos that I've done, let's just get trimmed while I talk. It's multitasking, guys. We're going a bit too high. We should be at 1200, so let's get our nose down. Normally what we do is also bring the RPM back while in the circuit. For this first one, we might try another one after this. If this one is a success, we will leave the RPM as it is. So just getting a little bit off. We want to have these buildings on our right hand side. So as I said, guys, when the engine goes pop, what are we going to do? We're going to go 70 knots. We're going to put in one stage of flaps, and we're going to basically try a continuous turn towards the runway, which is down here. What we don't do is do a normal circuit where we go out, base, and then when your engine goes pop, you want to get back to the runway as quick as possible, but also you need to judge that you're going to land on the runway, so you don't want to go too far past it because runway below you is no use. So let's try it from here. So engine goes pop, bring back the power like that. We're going to get to our 70 knots, first stage of flaps. Start our turn because we know that the engine's gone, so we want to start our turn towards runway. You can feel the drag coming in, so we're just trimming. Still need to bring that nose back because we're just between 70 and 80. That's 70 there, so we'll just start to bring the nose down and then up. So it's a bit of a juggling act. We just keep playing with the trim as well. You can see we're just starting our continuous turn here. We're not worried about flying the actual circuit. So that's the runway in the distance over there. It's still got our 70 knots in. We're going to come in at slightly almost a diagonal because we want to make the runway. It's looking okay at the moment. I think we will make this, he says, fingers crossed. This all happens very quickly. Normally if you're higher up, you'd do restart flows, which would be looking at sort of the fuel pump, etc. So we're getting a bit slow there. We still want to make 70 knots. So we do we check the fuel, we put the fuel pump on, we turn the magnetos just to make sure we can get there. So at the moment we're looking okay. We haven't done anything with the power. We're gliding in. and it looks like we will just make this. We'll put in the full stage of flap now because we know we're going to make it, and that brings our aiming point a little bit closer. And what we're doing is just aiming for about 60 knots. So this is going to look quite good, guys. There we go. Just slowly down the runway, bring the nose back, gently down. We'll do a bit of a touch and go here. So we'll put the throttle forward. A little bit of aggressive rudder there. So that's around 55 there. So back up we go. We'll do one more. So it all happens really quickly, guys. Really quickly. And in the real world, you wouldn't know it's going to happen. So when you do this in lessons, quite often the instructor will tell you we're going to do one, and so you're sort of on a bit of edge. You know what's going to happen. And in the real world, and we might do it in this one, it probably takes you about maybe 5 seconds to realize what's going on. And there's this initial. Again, to caveat, I've never had one and I never want to have one. Let's just bring flaps up. But what you don't want to, you always have to be aware of it. And in the real world, I'd say I think there'll probably be a good sort of 5 seconds where you sort of wonder what's going on, sort of reality sinking in before you actually start your turn. And that's it. I'm sure we get taught that. Ooh, bit of a sharp turn there. We do get taught that. If you've ever watched Sully, I'm pretty sure they use that in part of their arguments, because when they're doing it in the simulator when they're in the simulator and they have the engines going down and they're trying to recreate it, the guys in the simulator know it's going to happen, so they basically turn straight away, I think, to try and make another runway, whereas the real pilots didn't do that. And actually, you have to think about the human factors of when something like this happens. You don't react straight away. There will be a pause. So that's 1,200 feet. Just level off. Get the attitude right. Bit of a quick turn there. We're just going to bring the power back again. There we go. Trim. So again, in the real world, you sort of know this is going to happen. Got the runway over here. Oh, we're ballooning up. Not very good at talking and flying the aircraft, guys, but in the real world it's a bit easier. It's sort of not using a joystick and going from there. So maybe what we'll do this time is we'll go right out to sort of the end of the circuit, which is where these, if you've done one before, these sewage tanks are, and we'll do that. We're up at 1,300 feet, so we're not gonna cheat. There are definitely times in the real world where the instructor tells you you're going to do it, and you try and get above the circuit height slightly just to give yourself a bit more leeway. But ultimately, you're trying to make this as real as possible. Just get my viewpoint a little bit more straight on. So we're coming down here. So let's do it from around here, and we'll give it a few seconds just to sink in. So engine goes pop. You've got a passenger you're chatting. You're like, oh, this isn't working. This is not working. So we begin our turn. So we're going to get up to, again, raise the nose, so we gain a little bit of height to get to 70 knots. First stage of flaps goes in, and that's us at just above our best glide. So we're pulling the nose up to get to best glide, which is 70, which is just there. Again, we're just starting a turn towards the runway. We do that instantly because ultimately with no engine, you want to get to your point of landing as quickly as you can. But I'd say you don't want to turn too early. In the real world, if you're quite high, what you don't want to do is overshoot the runway, because at the end of the runway, there's nothing. So you don't want to, you really don't want to sort of get this wrong. It's not about turning quickly to the runway and overshooting it. So we've done quite a kind of tight curve coming in. But this is looking good. Still at 70, we're about 500 feet, which is where I'd expect to be on this approach. Just going a little bit through. And the more smooth, which I'm not being, guys, the more smooth you can be with the controls, the better, because the more you're turning, the more you're bleeding off speed. So I think we're going to make this, so full flap goes in. And if you're too high, you can do things like side slips, but you only want to do that when you're absolutely certain. So we're just going to glide over the numbers here. Just look down the runway, look down the runway, bring the stick back, bring the stick back, and we're down. Excellent. Very good. So we'll just turn off, get ourselves away. At Redhill, you can't turn off without the air traffic control guys telling you to. It's one of the standard operating procedures. Bring the flaps up. Just park here, guys, and have a little debrief. So that was what we call sort of, I guess, practice forced landings. I guess it's the engine failing. What would happen in the real world? We tend to practice it more in your training, and then when you're flying as a real world pilot, you might do some practices as well, just to keep your eye in. Different for different aircraft, but if you think about what we did, the moment the engine went pop, we went for best glide, so we pulled the stick back, get to 70 knots, and that also gave us a little bit of height to play with, which is important because you want to get as much height as possible when your engine stops. Pull the stick back, first stage of flaps, and start your turn, and try and keep it a continuous turn into runway. You'll see sometimes I straightened up. I actually on the last one went through the center line, which isn't ideal because in essence you're adding more distance towards where you get to on the runway. It always seemed like you might be coming up short. These aircraft and a lot of aircraft, once you've got the correct glide, they will glide quite a long way, even low to the ground. They will still give you that enough glide to make the runway. So have a go at it, guys. It's quite good fun. We do it in the circuit. We have to ask permission. We also might do it while we're just out and about on a bit of a bimble and we want to practice going into a field with no one around, and making sure that we've still got those skills that are part of our training. I hope it's been useful, guys. I've been SimScott185. If you've enjoyed this, hit the like button, give it a subscribe, and we'll do something for you guys soon. All right, cheers.